During the course of the past 3 weeks, staff have undertaken the first round of observations. By enabling joint observations, we have developed heads of department to feel more secure in diagnostically assessing the staff's needs, but it has also allowed us something else. Here, Jo Parkinson will outline some outstanding practice that she saw in one lesson.
Okay. I just want to tell you a little bit about some outstanding practice that I've seen when I've been into several lessons over the last few weeks. In a geography lesson that I saw with Mr Goodfellow, I was really impressed about how he built on prior knowledge. He started with a really challenging starter. If I can just show you what he used. This is called a living graph, and as you can see, the graph at the bottom is a seismograph reading from an earthquake. And even though the pupils had worked on this, all they knew was that it was a reading. He then gave them a list of different labels, and they had to read the label and associate what part of the graph that label would go on. Now, I was a little bit concerned because I thought they're not going to get this. And after a couple of minutes, it became quite evident that some of them weren't getting it, but David was really aware of that, and he stopped the task and he modelled one of the statements. And then from then on, they were able to then identify where the other statements would go. And the questioning that followed on from that was really high-level thinking. You know, debating over whether they put the statements in the right place. There were other people saying, no, it should be here, but being able to justify why. And then that led on to an amazing piece of written work which allowed them to develop what they'd learnt at the start.
When observing maths lessons recently, one great example of good practice that I saw was a task that involved questions being put around the classroom, and the pupils had to get up together and go and complete the questions and going from one part of the room to the other. And the good thing about it was differentiated, the task. There was a level 7 task and a level 6 task. And what I liked about it was all the pupils engaged with the task and each other, and we often caught other pupils helping other pupils out to help with the learning. And then you'd also get pupils who were thinking, I want to do the level 7 task, why wasn't I chosen? So they try and do the level 6 task quick so they can get on the level 7 task.
I'd like to comment on some outstanding practice that I saw during a netball lesson. Pupils were put into groups of 4, and one pupil was assigned the role of a teacher. Their role was to guide, to explain and comment on the learning that was taking place from the other pupils. So in this instance, to see whether or not the pupil had learnt how to do this effectively from the teacher, I decided to join in the activity. It was clear that she knew exactly what to do to move me forward and gave me sound advice and enabled me to pass the netball properly in the way that I was expected to. It was clear that all pupils were making progress because of the guidance that the teacher gave to these individual pupils.
On the recent rounds of lesson observations that we've just been observing, some outstanding practice I saw was in a lesson where a teacher had used prior assessment to ensure that planning of the lesson met the needs of all the pupils in her group. All the work had been marked and all the pupils were given post-it notes of different colours that were placed on their exercise books. The colour of the post-it notes indicated which group the pupils were going to be working in. And almost straight away after the starter activity, the group of pupils that had shown good understanding in the previous lesson and had demonstrated to the teacher that they were able to move on were started off with a new task, an independent learning task that had consolidated their learning from the previous lesson. Other groups of pupils in the class were given a different colour post-it note, and these pupils worked alongside the teacher to work on the aspects of the lesson that they didn't fully understand previously.
Beth, what made the lesson outstanding?
Well, the pupils were all engaged and on task, and what they'd been asked to do was teach each other. So they got put in groups of 4 and they had to plan a lesson which included resources, so they had different ways of assessing each other, they had different worksheets, and the pupils took ownership of the learning and then each other's learning as well. So they prepared a lot of work. They then did self-assessment at the start of the lesson, saying where they thought they were at, and then at the end of the lesson, the teacher went back to it and addressed to see what progress had made, and also they had to highlight how else they could have improved, what other things they might have needed the teacher then to help them in the next lessons. There was excellent questioning to direct the pupils and to assess the pupils, lots of open questions so the teacher could further the knowledge. The behaviour was absolutely outstanding. All the pupils were focused and on task. The enjoyment levels were huge. Pupils said they really, really enjoyed taking ownership of the lesson. Some of the pupils had even made differentiated sheets for each of the groups. And by the end of the lesson, all pupils had made excellent progress.
That's brilliant, thank you.